Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in.
Well, I'm very excited to introduce a good friend of mine to our listeners. Travis Goodson is here to talk with us about the government track of IO psychology, a little bit about his work, and just his experience and his life in general. So Travis, why don't you introduce yourself?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Morgan. I appreciate it. So Dr. Travis Goodson, an IO psychologist at the PhD level. I am the chief executive officer of a Department of Defense contracting company called In Novi Defense. You can check us out. It's pretty great. And we are all things IO inside of the DoD space. So looking forward to unraveling that conversation as we go and telling you a little bit about what we do and how junior IOs or those looking for a pivot can make their way into the government.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Travis, why don't you start by giving our listeners a little bit of your background, how you got involved with the industrial organizational psychology realm and, into now the company that you're the CEO and founder of.
Perfect. Wow. Much like the rest of my colleagues, I think that at some point we all had the desire to go clinical and we realized that we were not people persons in that effect. So it was very similar for me. I got my undergraduate in general psychology. I wanted to be a neurologist at the time and did most of my pre-med classes, had a lot of friends in that circuit. And all of those that were currently in med school persuaded me to go a different route. They're like, hey, this is not where it's at. So I decided that I would go and try to be a neuropsychologist or a clinical psychologist and started taking classes in that effect. Ended up in a master's degree as an LPC, licensed professional counselor through Liberty University. Got about 3/4 of the way through it, and then also decided, man, I have a lot of my own problems. This is probably not the track for me. So it took a little bit of a hiatus. At that time, there was a lot going on. Obviously, I'm a dad. I have an absolutely amazing wife and 4 children. But at that time, I only had 1 kid, and I was like, man, I should really do something with my education that I've actually started, but didn't really have the funds at the time. So I was in the military. I went to Afghanistan. I was an infantry officer. I still am pretty active in the National Guard right now. And it was 2018 and 2019. When I went to Afghanistan, my wife and I, we prayed about it. We made the decision that I would go back to school, but what for? So I started looking at what would be a good fit for me. Just took some personality assessments online, talked to some of my colleagues, really got on LinkedIn and dove in. And what I found was this little unicorn called IO Psych. So it's a perfect blend of people and mathematics and business and finance. And I saw real tangible differences being made in that community. And also, just full disclosure is that there's a huge compensation gap between most IOs and the median salary rates and all the other psychological professions. So at the time, it just made a lot of logical sense that if I was going to invest the next 2 years of my life for a master's degree, that the earning potential would be worth it on the back end. So while I was in Afghanistan, I came really close to finishing my master's degree. We put all of our extra money into that so we could kind of fund our future. And as I got toward the end, I had a dear colleague of mine now. His name's Dr. Matthew Swain, one of the smartest men on the face of the planet. I remember I finished one of my exams and we were emailing back and forth, and he was like, hey, you need to go sign up for the PhD program. And I remember thinking, no, that's for really smart people, not for me. And he was like, you'd be a fantastic PhD level IO. He's like, you can do it. You need to do it. You are the guy for this. And so I went through and sent off my cover letter. He helped me with the paperwork, and I graduated back in 2022. Had a great time, and here we are.
Wow, what a story. That is it. You're absolutely correct about the pay gap part of things, for sure. And I love that story though, because it's really talking about the fit, and I know so many people who have, like you said, finished their degrees and went down that path thinking this is what I want to do, and then found out it wasn't the right fit. So kudos for you for figuring that out early and then kind of auto-correcting to a place that made sense for you. So I'd give you a little kudos there.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on the PhD in 2022. I think we had connected back around when you started your PhD, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it was back when I was in my master's program. So it's crazy to to think how things change for us and how we all develop, and just to see where you've gone. I know we had connected way back when to talk about how do we get noticed in the IO psychology sphere? How do we start growing? What do we do? Who do we reach out to so that we know what we're going to do in our lives, right? And you and I had connected because we were in the same spot saying, okay, like who do we reach out to? And we're growing our LinkedIn pages a little bit. So to see where you've grown now and seeing In Novi Defense and hearing of what you've done there on other conversations, obviously off the podcast, since we do talk often, has been honestly makes me feel like I could do a lot more. I'll be fully honest. But tell our listeners more about In Novi Defense. You started it. You're the CEO. I know you have kind of a mantra about, being a leader and also knowing the product at the company.
Absolutely.
So tell us more about it.
So In Novi Defense was founded in June of 2024. I have a pretty rich history with the Department of Defense, deployed and mobilized all over the place. I've trained the Senegalese and the Moroccans in Africa. I've trained with the German army in Germany, obviously deployed to Afghanistan. We've just done a lot with host nation partners and whatnot. So with that background, in addition to IO psychology, is I really wanted to find not only what I liked, but where I can make a real big impact. And I think that that's really important. And I try to, because I'm a dad, I break a lot of things down into childlike examples. It's like I tell my kids, sometimes it's not about what you like, it's what you're good at and what you're called to do. So this whole like follow your passions thing, I'm definitely a huge like that doesn't work. It's not logical, at least not for me. So what I did is I was like, okay, so I have these two worlds that I exist in. So I exist as an academic, but I also exist as this soldier. And how can I blend these two things? So at the time I was working as a senior executive in another contracting company. And with IOs, we have a tendency to look at management styles and leadership, and we tend to make observations. And I was like, man, I can do this. I have the self-efficacy, the self-confidence, and the self-esteem to go out and do my own and build something that's more amenable to the lifestyle that I want to live and to build. So I did that. I think that's also another IO trait, is that we have that ability to see and frame things in a way that makes sense for us. So it was a very logical fit for me to progress from a senior echelon of leadership and a very, very large company to saying, I can do this in the startup world and we have what it takes. So I got together my partners. I have two partners right now. And I said, I'm going to start this. Do you guys want in? And we went through and split up the equity. And I said, this is the route that God's called me in. This is where I'm gifted in, and this is what we're going to do. And we started June 23rd, 2024. And then if you know anything about defense contracting at all, it takes a little bit of time to go through and get the right numbers associated with your business. You have what's called a UEI, and then you have a cage code issued through DLA. So we got our UEI and cage code on the 10th, and we had our first contract on the 13th. So
Wow.
Incredibly aggressive, almost unheard of in the space. And it's a testament to the team. It's a testament to believing in yourself. And then we scaled that. We went from 0 to 6 figures in like 60 days. And we just recently crossed the 7-figure mark in business. So it took. So I know that we started in June, but if you factor that in, realistically, it was September. So in less than 12 months in business, we were able to cross $1 million. And to me, that's just, it's about the journey and it's about the effort. It's like the person that you become in the process. So I say all that to say, what does In Novi Defense do? Okay. So the company itself that I run, manage, and work in is focused on sitting at the intersection between technology, training, and the human condition, right? So a lot of it has to do with very heavy organizational change management, but it's very specialized. When we look at our DoD customers in the Marine Corps and in the Navy, we've done some work with the National Science Foundation. A lot of it is model testing, but it's not just testing of the artificial intelligence models, the weights and biases, the artificial neural networks and things of that nature, but it's also evaluating how the humans respond, the personnel and the customers respond to the implementation of this technology. And we've found that IO psychology is the absolute perfect fit, like to sit right where we are in the marketplace, because there's this intangible friction between this technology is cutting edge and it could also replace you. These are some of the thoughts that come around. So what do you need? You need a business therapist, if you will, to sit there and break it down. But we pride ourselves in being both technically proficient, experts in our craft. When you look at Gini values and ROC curves and all of this stuff, we know how to interpret, we know how to model these things, but we also are able to sit down with you shoulder to shoulder and say, hey, talk to me about what your concerns are when it comes to leveraging this technology. We also build scales and tests to assess these things. We build custom items. So I love it. I could not have imagined in my wildest dreams that I would be here running the world's most perfect company for IOs, but here we are.
That is amazing. Yeah, the change management piece, like you're so right. And I've seen it so many times where that intersection, it just doesn't happen. It's like we kind of get to the intersection and we go, we won't think about the people, we'll just do it anyway. We'll whatever happens. And I think that is an absolute mistake, because ultimately the people are the ones engaging with the technology, right? So you need to have that. I absolutely love that. Out of curiosity, from a change management perspective, do you have like a theoretical idea about that? Do you do it differently than say ProSci or different change management models like that?
Oh, yeah. So yes, that's a
fantastic
question. No, it's a really, really good question. And it's good. I feel like I'm at home. I'm in the comfort of other IOs, so we can talk about these things, because it's weird when you talk about, the theoretical underpinnings of what your approach is to that intervention, whatever the case might be. So as interesting as it sounds, I did all of my doctoral work on Grain and Ulbane's leader member exchange theory, right? So that was the grounding of my dissertation. And what I'm finding as an organizational change management model that works really, really well is, yes, the ADKAR model from ProSci works. It does. I'm a huge proponent of it. But really at the core, in a situation with as much cognitive dissonance as the implementation of AI and the potential that you're, in effect, training the person that's going to replace you, I find that it's much more helpful and beneficial to focus on the dyadic relationship, vertical dyadic linkage theory, if you will, which spilled into LMX, to look at that relationship, a connection between the supervisors in this organization and their employees. So not only is the behavior doesn't need to be modeled, but they need to have that trust. They need to have that transparency. And these are the things, the intangibles that IOs are perfectly equipped to evaluate: the constructs, the items, the factors, and to field the right scales, to build custom items if you need to really say, hey, the problem that we have is not the technology. The problem that we have is not even the friction. It's that we need the buy-in from both sides to strengthen the vertical dyadic linkage between the employees and every echelon of leadership to make the initiative effective. So that's probably my number one grounding, if you will, in my methodology and approach.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we do talk about very often is it really is all about buy-in in the end. If you don't have the involvement, the buy-in, you also don't know how it's working on the floor. And then you have that asymmetric information bias that's occurring where you as the practitioner don't even get the feedback that you need to make sure that the change you're trying to make is effective, right? And so for that reason, buy-in is first and foremost. Funny enough, I've been interviewing for a leadership position at the company I work internally at, and with it, it's a supervisor position, but I'm still expecting that high-end leaders to come into a supervisor-based position. And all we're talking about is, okay, well, without asking, what do you do for innovation and improvements and all that? Without asking about it, I ask about it. And then I also ask about buy-in without asking, how do you get buy-in? I ask them what their process is, and I want to hear more. And it's because if the leader's going to come in, they need to be able to get buy-in and manage the change effectively. They also need to know how to manage the change with those above them. So say convincing a manager that this is the right route to take. So it's the same exact thing, but on a much smaller scale than what you're doing.
I'd say the principles still apply. And I think that it's beautiful that you're able to graft in some of those methodologies into whatever size of team that you have, because that's really what differentiates successful companies from those that are, they just experience a lot of churn and they have all these problems that we see across the marketplace with employees being laid off and leaving, and people with, these gaps in their resume where they hop jobs every 6 to 8 months because the workplace is, and I hate to use this term, workplace is toxic, but it might just be that people are ill-equipped, they're not trained, they're not knowledgeable, and they have no understanding of the dynamics of business. And that's why I love IO. So it's great to be, discussing this today. I didn't know we'd get this deep this fast.
That's I think it's like you mentioned too, it's like that dyadic relationship too. I think so many times it's when when there's breakdowns in those relationships, you begin to see some of that toxicity and it just kind of festers. You know what I mean? And I think if people could spend more time on the people side, leaders and employees both, strengthening those relationships in both directions, right? It would be a more natural experience when change does occur. That's my belief. I see it differently. I'm not a huge believer in like throwing data over the wall and just letting people figure it out themselves. I think it's the building of that relationship, and growth happens when people are together and grow together. You know what I mean? And it just, so I love what you're saying. I mean, all of the things you're talking about, I apply in a different type of way because I don't own a technology company. But yeah,
we're all IOs, so we all apply it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't help it. I think I even like with my neighbors probably do some of this stuff all the time. So
yes, oh, definitely. It's hard not to apply it across life when you understand the functions behind people and personality and the way in which to build and improve relationships. It truly is hard not to apply it. But I would say like there's a huge strategic component to getting your hands dirty. Like as a technology individual, getting your hands dirty, being involved, being in the nitty gritty of the data. And not just, as you said, Elizabeth, throwing it over the wall, it goes a long way. It's the idea of like leading by example. And so when you are there in the trenches, not to play on the military terms here, but when you're in the trenches with them, you're able to really lead them through in a better manner. So Travis, I do have a question for you. Tell us more about, the mission behind your organization and the effect you hope it has long-term. On the contracts that you're working with.
So that's another great question. So the mission that we have is we obviously want to impact. The whole reason we got this is we have a vested interest in our warfighters becoming the most lethal and the safest they can possibly be at the cutting edge of battle. So I say that because I'm an infantry officer, and it has a direct connection to my, mortality, if you will, in future conflicts. So one of the, to put it into examples like this, there's a lot of times in life where you can sit down and you can mentor someone and you can pour into someone, one individual, and you can make that person 50 to 70% more proficient at a skill or a task. And that approach is good, but that doesn't really affect an entire enterprise. So the way that we look at it is that in Novi Defense, we don't exist to make one person perfect. We exist to make the entire enterprise 1 to 5% better. Because if I can increase the lethality of 700,000 people by 5%, we effectively win whatever conflict it is. And so looking at it broad spectrum, our mission is to impact in some way the enterprise as a whole to increase proficiency and organizational change management by 5% across the entire enterprise. That's the Marine Corps, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, Space Force, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Veterans Affairs. I mean, think about it. There's just so many attributes when you think about service members that come back home, they get out of the military, they apply for VA benefits, whether you're for or against. There's a lot of political camps on this, but just imagine that everybody in that organization was just 5% better. Imagine that every single governmental civilian inside of the Marine Corps was just 5% better at their job because they had the right tools and training and techniques. So we try to take a holistic approach, and that's really what our mission is to make the entire enterprise just 5% better.
And I think that does apply across organizations. It doesn't just apply to, as you say, the military, and your goal is 5% better across that. Well, it can apply in an organization when you take that holistic perspective. I know Darian, our IO behind the scenes, he interviewed me to discuss the industry track of IO psychology, and I really talked about the holistic side. If you can raise up one tier, you can raise up all the tiers with it, right? And so I discussed that myself. So obviously, I think our listeners can tell why Travis and I are pretty good connections and talk decently often. I don't feel like we've talked as often, but summertime is busy.
We've been a little busy. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, come on, you hit 7 figures, which is pretty impressive just recently. So I can imagine why we haven't connected. But I would love to hear, well, let me first preface it with this is when I think of IO psychology in government, I oftentimes default to thinking of military. I do. I think I do because when I was going into the IO psychology realm, I actually thought of myself entering into the military. No, I did not, because it was around, the pandemic ended up happening. I was debating going for my PhD, but I decided not to. If I was going to go for my PhD, I did decide I was going to go into the military to help support that and then have the effects there. But so because of that, I tend to default and think of military right off the bat. Do you feel, Travis, that your experience on the government track of IO extremely differs from the average experience of an IO psychology individual who's going into the quote unquote government track?
I don't think that there's a number that could quantify the level of difference. Um, Seriously, like 100%, I think is far less. I know that's illogical, but the reality is that most IOs that have a desire to enter whatever field, especially whenever they first graduate, they don't have any real experience, tangible experience inside of the shoes of anyone in that field. For example, you have somebody that comes out with a master's degree in IO, they go, "Oh, I want to be a human resources manager." First of all, I'm going to say, no, don't do that. But their first inclination is they want to go HR. And meanwhile, you've never really been an employee that's had to deal with HR, right? So
Mhm.
if you've never seen a PIP, if you've never seen a performance appraisal, if you've never seen the finances, if you don't know what the fully burdened rate of an employee is, or the total cost of ownership of an employee and a benefits package and healthcare looks like how are you going to be effective as someone that measures things that you don't even know exist? So
Mhm.
the hard part of that is whenever you look at inside of the government. Now, I'm going to separate government into two different prongs here. Okay. So the first one is going to be the active duty military component, which is a markedly different beast, if you will, than just the government, because you have government civilians and you have contractors. So you
Mhm.
can be effective as an IO working with government civilians and contractors, which most of the time are, prior military and veterans and whatnot. But the active duty component is just a whole different animal. It is literally a whole different animal. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to be an IO that works in a healthcare setting. And the next day you're like, I want to be an IO that works in space. It's like they are not the same. They are not the same. Like just because
Yeah.
they're called government, you're not dealing with the same problems. Um,
Mhm.
for brief example, so in the military, it's very common for every 18 months to every 4 years, leadership rotates out. Okay. Everybody across the force is rotating to somewhere on the planet every 2 to 4 years. So that being said, like your long-term organizational change management initiatives are not going to work because the leaders are not going to be the same. And by the way, the leaders change at a staggered rate. So you might lose one senior leader every 12 months. So just putting that into perspective is as a part of your planning process and your methodology, you have to account for those things. And then you also
Mhm.
have to account for the lived experience of those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that are dealing with, that specific lifestyle. Whereas in the government, you have people that work in one position in one building for 25 years. You have to take a much longer time horizon for your interventions to actually work, where all that's compressed for the active duty component. So I say all that to say this is that working as an active duty military officer in multiple scenarios around the world and multiple types of operations, I know the unique struggles and heartaches that another IO is not going to have the chance to see behind the curtain. Like, I've been the guy with the rifle crawling on the ground, and I've also been the guy leading people doing that. And now I'm evaluating how to make that process better, more equitable, more focusing on the survivability. We're looking at drones and AI and tech at this intersection. But I've existed at all those echelons of leadership inside of this organization. So I have, if you will, the ability to reach out and shake somebody's hand and say, I have felt your struggle. I have walked in your shoes. And that's very powerful when you're looking at organizational change management dynamics because you're relatable, because you're authentic and it's not
Mhm.
fake. But then on the government side, I can turn around and say, hey, I was in school for approximately 15 years to get my PhD. Like, I know what it's like to continue to raise the bar, to continue to grow in a specific career track, to broaden and to interface. I know what politics are. And there's a lot of bleed over. So I would say that the stark contrast between other IOs that want to get into the government sector and those that exist in the active duty space, that's a very difficult pill to swallow. Not impossible, but my advice would be is know your audience, know your ideal client, right? And then really dig in and start doing your research as to what the unique dynamics are of that specific space.
Yeah, I can agree with you on the sense of I tell any IO, no matter what you're doing, like especially on the consulting track, because I too often see like an IO individual who has no experience, absolutely no experience. Maybe they were an intern of some sort. So same thing, like you said, like don't go in as an HR manager. You don't even know what you're measuring yet. You don't even know the constructs exist. So I oftentimes tell them, okay, and with the mentees I've worked with, okay, it's great that you want to consult, but I would recommend that you get experience first, because how are you going to consult if you don't understand the nitty gritty of an organization? And then when you are consulting, make sure you understand that company through and through. You know the people, because if you don't consult in a way that you understand the company you're consulting for, your change is never going to be effective that you're recommending or that you're helping implement. It's never going to go as far as if you knew where every last pen was in that organization, right? So kind of like thinking of it to the last drop. And to an extent, you know, the government on the civilian side track seems much more related to the industry track. I would say there is a crossover, but then when you get to the active duty side, it looks very different. I think you have taken what some IOs do, and you've basically in the active duty or even in the government civilian side, and you've exploded it in a way. Like you kind of had the big bang happen within your organization for your focuses. And it's impressive to see, one, but two, I think a lot of the IOs that might be listening to this and thinking of, oh, I might want to take that track, need to take a step back and remember, I need to learn how to have that full holistic perspective. And so I might need to be more specialized in one area first before I can get to that. I would strongly recommend that individuals do reach out to Travis and talk with him, because you will be surprised by even more of what he has to say in a good way. I definitely. But there's a lot of different ways that you can go in a track. Government on the civilian side sounds more related to industry, but then the active duty side doesn't seem as related to industry because of that turnover that you naturally see. And one other thing to note is Travis is technically a consultant on top of all this. So then there comes the consulting track. So the tracks do overlap significantly, despite, you know, we've tried to break them down, but we break them down in a way that there's a generalized understanding of the track. It doesn't mean that they don't overlap still.
Yeah. No, completely agree. Completely agree. The other role that I have that we haven't talked about yet is I'm also an adjunct professor of psychology at Albany State University. And for the last, I want to say over 2 years, I've been the chair of the Artificial Intelligence Committee. So a lot of the skills, and I say that not to gloat, but to show you as a listener, is that you can do multiple things at the same time, but it really just comes down to being in the right frame of mind. So what I mean by that is you have to be solution focused. So if you will notice with all of my careers, and I have many, I think I have like 6 different jobs that I do right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. I chose that. I want that. I like living that way, but they all have overlap. Like all of them are about 50 to 75% related in the content and context of what I do. So in Novi Defense, obviously we mix the soldier/warrior experience with advanced technology, and IO sits at the juxtaposition there. When I teach as an adjunct, professor, I blend AI and technology and career readiness into my classroom. IO sit at the juxtaposition there. When I'm doing consulting for the Pentagon or somewhere else, like that work is squarely, in an evaluative capacity, and IO sits immediately right there. So all of these tracks overlap for me, but the reason why it's not such a cognitive burden is because I'm not code switching. I'm not going, oh, I'm going to do, pharmaceutical consulting today, and I'm going to do agricultural tomorrow. No. So my advice to those that are listening is find something you're good at. Like, don't look for your passion. Like, that's not going to help you. You're not going to make a living at that. Okay. Find something you're naturally gifted in and say, how can I explore this specific, niche of business? And then how can I broaden those streams to do this 7 or 8 different times where it's not that cognitively taxing and I can just continue to grow in the way that I want to.
Yeah. That niche that you just used the word, that's the word that's been going on in my head for a while now. I think so many people, they get out there, they want to, they want to get the experience. And that's something we hear commonly from people, right? Is there's no way to get the experience. How can I ever become a consultant, or how can I do these things? And I do think there's some initiative taking that you have to take initiative to find that experience, right? And I do want to just quickly go back because there was something else that I was thinking about as you were talking about kind of, you know, knowing your niche and understanding kind of where you're going. I would even argue that it's not even that you might not help someone. I think without the proper training or without the proper experience and all of those things, you can actually do some pretty significant harm as well. And so I think it's, and I'm just going to say that for what it's worth, because you can walk into a company trying to do a change management thing and it cannot work and can be harmful, right? And so I think getting that experience, talking to people as you both have, right? And as we talk to so many people in this field, I think it's those connections with each other that maybe helps us to define what is that niche, what makes sense for someone, right? It's through these conversations we can start to figure out what that is. And so I would just encourage any listeners who are in the IO space, if you're not sure what your niche is, if you're not sure what those interests are, what, as Travis said, what you're really good at, start talking to some other people and just explore, just like Travis, you did when you were trying to figure out where you wanted to go, right? Like seeking out people and personality assessments and all of those things. So I just think that's really cool.
I've told those new entry level IOs, even if you just get like a generic position, you can still apply IO psychology principles in any generic business position you might get. It might be harder, might be easier, but you can naturally build upon your learning. Unfortunately, we do tend to have a harder time getting into the workspace because there are so many different positions that could apply to us. But I even tell an IO, like, do you like consumer psychology? And they'll go, yeah, I do. I'm like, maybe you're meant for the marketing or sales realm. And they're like, what? Sales? Marketing? And I'm like, consumer psychology, maybe more on the support side, not necessarily deciding exactly what to market or the one talking to customers, but you might be meant for that industry, that area where you help with the stats behind the scenes to understand, okay, this is having an effect, this is not having an effect, and then also getting to know maybe an artistic side to psychology and applying that in consumer psychology. So knowing your niche is super important, but first you have to kind of find it. I do think a lot of IOs go in and they do research in their programs, whether that be master's, bachelor's is less common, I do feel, or even a doctorate, and you tend to find what you're interested in studying, whether that be diversity, whether that be the consumer side, whether that be more cultural, technologically based, and you do your capstone, your thesis, your research, and your classes that you're working in, your practices that the internships you usually have to do as a part of your program, you tend to filter towards those. So you are already developing your niche at that point in time, but it doesn't hurt to also talk with someone that above you who's been working in the industry, who can help you figure out what your niche is. I can say, years ago, I connected and we had her on, was Patty Delgado, Dr. Patty. Her and I connected, and I didn't know what my niche was at that point. And then after talking with her, she really helped me break it down, and I figured it out a lot better. And it's probably still developing. It's not as, solid and set in stone as Travis is here, but I really recommend that you reach out to the IOs around you for guidance. But also know, as an IO psychology professional, you naturally have to cut your own path. You're not following a path.
Yes, 1000%. You said something there that's very pointed, and for the listeners, obviously you can reach out to myself at any point in time. I do stay very busy, but I do my best to reach out, especially to junior IOs. We at my organization, we love to hire IOs because I spend a lot of time and a lot of money learning a very specific language, and that language is IO psychology. So I love to have the ability to turn around to any and every employee and speak my favorite language, and for them to know exactly what I'm talking about. And it makes things very, very easy. So first of all, if you're interested in tech, if you're interested in AI, you have a programmatic background, you think analytically, and you like people, but you really love to solve hard problems, like you need to go through and reach out, because we will have a position for you in the near future. The second thing is exactly what Morgan was talking about in terms of reaching out to more seasoned IOs. The two biggest problems I have, and this is for all the listeners, especially if you're brand new, listen to this. This is money. This is going to help you. So the first thing is you need to get exposed to what IO has to offer. That's why I'm so glad I'm on this podcast, because there's not a ton of IOs that exist in a position outside of like IO psychology. Yes, there's roles where psychology plays, but like as a chief executive officer, any background really applies. So it's unique to see an IO in that specific space that's very prominent about this is how I got here. So pay attention to those things. Find the people that you want to be like in the next 5 years and send them a message. Like send them some donuts, a card or something, because everything that you learned in school is just fine and dandy. And I love school. I was there for 15 years after high school. Like I get that, but there's so much nuance to what you learned and how it's applied. So you need to start fostering those connections to say, okay, where does the rubber meet the road? Like you have a beautiful Ferrari that's on jack stands right now, and you need somebody that's 5 years ahead to say, hey, it's time to put this thing on the ground and put it into drive, or you're going to spin your wheels. The second thing, this is the biggest mistake. Man, I say I'm one of them. I'm one of them. I get it. IOs are so arrogant. Hear me. IOs are so arrogant. Okay. So hear me out here. I've been a junior IO, cutting my teeth at a very entry-level job, and now I'm a CEO. And there's a huge difference in the responsibility and compensation for both of those individuals, okay, in the world writ large. If you cannot quantify the value that you bring to a table as an IO, you have no value. So I say this, Dr. Leroy Simpson is a really dear friend of mine. He's on LinkedIn. Encourage you to reach out to him. He's just as aggressive as I am in mentoring junior IOs. And I say aggressive is because we want people to be successful. But what I see a lot from IOs is they walk in, they just graduated a master's degree, and they go, I won $175,000 because I'm worth it. And I go, okay, where is the value in the services that you bring? And they go, okay, I know how to do psychometric testing. That's fantastic. So do I. And they go, well, I know how to do organizational change management. I was like, what were the results of the organizational change management that you've done recently? What's your example? What's your case study? What are your projections? What's the ROI for me as a business owner to hire you to do this job? So you have no way of quantifying what your impact is. If you as an IO cannot quantify how your skills make you different, then you should have went for an MBA. Like the whole reason we're different, and I'm not saying that because I don't like MBAs. MBAs are fantastic individuals. But if you went to learn how to measure constructs and items and factors, if you went to school for that and you don't know how to do it, then you're worthless to me. Yeah. Because that's what makes you special. Is I can say, hey, this huge nebulous idea that's really difficult, yeah, I need you to go fix that. And you're like, yeah, of course. Like I'll develop items, like I'll research, I'll study, I'll do all, and then I'll do a change management initiative. We'll create a post test. Like I'll get this squared away. That's what makes you unique as an IO. So don't walk up to people and be so arrogant that you think that you command what other people that can quantify their value don't think that you deserve the same. Because yeah, you might have the same degree, but their Ferrari's on the ground and they're cruising at 100 miles an hour and you're still on jack stands. So your whole goal should be, one, get a mentor as quickly as possible. And two, learn how to quantify your value. It could be leadership training. It could be curriculum development. It could be psychometrics. It could be change management. But you've got to be able to put that to a time savings or cost savings to make any difference in this marketplace. That's my soapbox.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say that it's a good soapbox, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues that we have across the board, right, in the world of psychology, but more specifically within the applied sciences, or IO, in particular, is that a lot of people can't describe what an IO is, and that's part of the problem, right? We can't describe, like you said, the value that an IO psychologist or an IO practitioner brings to the table, right? So when you say, let's say, if I say I'm a business psychologist, often what I get is, oh, so you do therapy in businesses. No, I'm not that kind of psychologist, right? Like I'm not there talking about, right? Like there's those boundaries, right? But most people can't describe what that is, and it's a shame, because this field could be something so amazing. And I really will say, like, and maybe it's a crusade of mine in the future. And I think maybe, I know Morgan shares it with me too, but like, I want to change the game, like let's get out there as applied psychologists, as IO psychologists, and show people where it's at, because they'll never know if we don't take the steps to do it.
Yeah. I think Travis's soapbox was extremely necessary for a lot of IOs to, or entry level, especially, to hear. And, I'm a huge fan of metaphors, especially those extended ones like the Ferrari metaphor. So thank you, Travis. And the thing I want to drive home is we all want to have a really beneficial impact. We want, typically you're called to IO because you want to have an impact in some way, shape, or form in the world. And that could be on any different niche of the IO realm. Because we all want to be happy at work. We want to have, we want to feel fulfilled at work, right? But in the end, business is money. Money is business. And so you need to be able to have that ROI, as Travis was saying. You need to understand what your impact can be and know that, the company might be spending money on you, but you're actually saving or earning the company more money in turn.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. And I think it makes it a little bit more black and white for some IOs entering the field if they want to go right into a higher level position potentially. I'm not saying that's like higher level truly, like you're not necessarily in a management or a leadership role, but one that's more highly paid. If you want to naturally get that more highly paid position, you need to know what you're earning or saving a company. I actually had a conversation with my management team months ago, I think it was, because a couple of them were like, oh, can this person get a raise? Can this person get a raise? Can this person get a raise? I'm like, why do you keep asking me to give raises to these people who are just got a raise like recently? Why do they want more? And they're like, oh, well, they just think that they should earn more. I'm like, okay, why? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, it's your job to lead them in the direction of why do you think you should earn more? What are you saving the company or earning the company in turn? I actually said that because while yes, I would love to invest as much money as I can into all my people, there is a monetary component to business that we have to think on. There's a budgetary component and the financials surrounding each and every position, each and every skill set, each and every position. But if someone can show their worth through what they earn or save, you're going to have a larger impact for your own career. Then you can have the bigger impact you want to see on the world.
Totally fair. Yeah. This conversation is just great. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just thinking about so many different things right now too. I don't know.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, this is why Travis and I talk too often, because these conversations just keep going.
Well, I know. So poor Travis is going to be stuck talking to me now probably too, because the whole AI conversation is one that I am highly invested in the academic space as well. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm not sure. Maybe that's another podcast too, but I know that I live and breathe it every single day, both with my husband in the technology space and then also working on the AI kind of policies and procedures within a university setting, which it's changing the game of education, which is good too. I think it's good, and there are some dangers there, but different. So.
Well, Travis, we really appreciate you coming on and talking with us more, telling us about In Novi Defense and your successes and your changes throughout your career. Thank you for your service as well. It's really important, and I really I appreciate our military so much. I have so many friends in the military, including you. So thank you for that. Are there any sentiments that you want to leave our listeners with before we log off?
Oh, there's so many. Oh man. I will say this is that the struggle is worth it. Okay. So if you're an IO, the 2025 job market is absolutely insanity right now. I'm actually hiring, by the way. There's a job on my LinkedIn, depending on when you're listening to this. Today's August 1st, 2025, and there's an active job posting on my LinkedIn. Look at it, role requirements. You get a chance to work with me every single day. So yeah, shameless plug for hiring. But that being said, the last sentiment is that the 2025 job market is insanity. So is 2024. But I want to let you know that it's worth it. Okay. Your struggle is worth it. Your growth is worth it. So if you're, 20 years in, PhD in academia, you're wondering if you're appreciated, I see you. I see you. I appreciate you. If you're brand new and you just have, your bachelor's degree in IO and you're like, man, that's a lot of debt to go into to get a master's degree in IO, and there's not, a job here or there. I see you. You're worth it. If you're someone that's stuck in between, you were just laid off from a job in some capacity, and you have a master's degree in IO, and you're like, what's next for me? This is so difficult. It's worth it. I see you. Keep going. So don't be discouraged, because this is the most incredible career field on the planet. And tune back in for the next episode. Hopefully you'll have me on again.
Oh my God, absolutely.
We bring guests back on, for sure. So Travis, you'll probably come on. Maybe I'll just start recording our conversations that when we connect in general and posting those as little extras for our people. Well, but thank you again. It's been so great having you. You know, we'll post out your position today too for our listeners. This episode is releasing in just a few days from when we're recording it here, but we'll post that position too.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we can talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Travis. Well, listeners, this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every Tuesday for your next Who Done It. This is Organizational Sherlocks closing today's case.
See you next time.